This woman had traveled to a remote convent to uncover the truth behind her brother's mysterious death. But she had no idea that the deeper she investigated, the more she would uncover a terrifying secret about her own past. The story begins with Grace working as an ophthalmologist, examining a patient suffering from a severe eye condition. After checking her, Grace admits that the case is beyond her specialty, but she offers to refer her to a friend who can provide better treatment. The patient agrees, and after the elderly couple leaves, Grace quietly watches them from the window. Moments later, Grace speaks with her friend John and explains the patient's condition. John agrees to take the case, and Grace thanks him for helping her. She then returns home, where she greets her cat, Moo. Before going to bed, Grace sends an email to her patient about the referral. Then suddenly the power goes out. Curious, Grace switches on the light, but there is still no power. She then hears a strange noise and walks around to investigate. Suddenly, she notices a bloodstain on her brother's photo attached to the mirror. As she looks closer, she sees the reflection of a nun standing behind her. But when Grace turns around, nobody is there. She searches around the house, but moments later, the phone rings. A man introduces himself as Detective Harris delivers a devastating news. Grace's brother's body has been found at an old convent in Scotland, and the police suspect a murder-suicide. Grace is left heartbroken. The next day, Grace travels to Scotland and meets Detective Harris at the police station. Harris explains that they are still investigating what happened, but Grace immediately tells him she wants to see her brother's body. Harris tries contacting the morgue, but no one answers. Instead, he decides to take Grace to the place where her brother was found. While driving, Harris reveals another disturbing detail. Father Carroll from Rome had recently visited the church and was also found dead inside. Later, Michael's body was discovered beneath the ruins of the old church on the rocks near the sea. The police believe Michael murdered Father Carroll before taking his own life, but Grace refuses to believe it. Grace insists that her brother would never commit such a crime or take his own life. Harris then asks if Michael was involved with an extreme religious group. Grace admits she does not know since they had not seen each other for years, and asks what made the group so extreme. Harris explains that the church is dedicated to fighting demonology, revealing that one nun, Sister Beth, claimed to see the devil and cut out her own eye. She tried to remove the other one but passed out. Grace argues that her brother was religious, not insane, and says she is not interested in religion. When they arrive at the convent, Mother Superior welcomes Grace and reveals that Michael was once loved by everyone before he fell into darkness. She claims a devil killed Father Carroll and Michael tried to stop it, but failed, leading him to take his own life. Grace questions whether she actually saw Michael kill himself, but Mother Superior gives a vague answer, saying that the eyes of God are watching everyone. Frustrated by the response, Grace asks Harris to take her to where her brother was found instead. Harris thanks Mother Superior as she holds a cross in her hand covered in blood. Soon, they arrive at the ruins of the old church, where Harris points to the rocks below, where Michael's body was discovered. Grace silently looks down, trying to understand what happened. Later, they arrive at the morgue, where Grace breaks down after seeing her brother's body. As she touches him, a ghostly image of Michael appears behind her, warning her that the place is not safe. Grace then experiences a flashback to her childhood, where young Michael saves her during a storm before they return home together. Grace suddenly wakes up in a hospital. A young nun is beside her, but leaves when Father Romero arrives. He explains that he is from the Vatican investigating the church tragedy and reveals that Grace fainted in the morgue. Grace insists something is wrong, saying Michael's body was completely clean despite being found near the sea. Father Romero explains that the morgue staff cleaned him before the autopsy but promises to look into it. When he asks about her family, Grace reveals her mother is dead and her father is in prison for murdering her. Father Romero offers his prayers, but Grace refuses, causing him to leave the room. As Grace falls asleep, she experiences a terrifying vision of a masked girl surrounded by kneeling figures. Suddenly, armed knights arrive, causing chaos as everyone flees in terror. She wakes up and leaves the hospital, taking a taxi back to the old church where Michael's body was found near the beach. Standing in the distance, Grace looks toward the abandoned church at the top of the cliff and the sea below. But when she looks back, she sees a nun standing at the top of the church before falling to her death. Shocked by what she witnesses, Grace collapses and falls into the sea. When she wakes up, she finds herself inside the convent wearing a nun's clothing. She steps out of the room and finds a nun. Grace asks where Mother Superior is, but the nun simply keeps her head down and refuses to answer. Frustrated, Grace continues exploring and eventually finds the nuns having lunch with Mother Superior after their prayers. Grace immediately demands to know where her clothes and phone are. Mother Superior explains that the convent follows strict discipline and invites Grace to join them for lunch. She then reveals that a taxi driver pulled Grace from the sea, but unfortunately, her phone was damaged and her clothes are still being dried. Mother Superior then asks Grace if she believes in miracles, but Grace simply replies no. Moments later, Father Romero takes Grace to the old church and explains its history. He reveals that in the 12th century, the church once hid a religious artifact, but it disappeared when the church collapsed. He explains that the church was founded by the Knights of the Morning Star and points out a cross with a snake carved on the ground, which symbolized their ultimate confession. After returning from the bloody crusades, the knights would stand before the cross and take a step back for every sin they committed. The more sins they carried, the farther they moved back. Grace comments that they eventually fell to their deaths, but Father Romero simply replies, "God caught them." Back at the convent, Father Romero tells Grace that Mother Superior admitted she washed Michael's body before sending it to the morgue, claiming it was done out of respect for him. He says he reported it to Detective Harris and promises to speak with Mother Superior again. He also assures Grace that she has the full support of the church. Father Romero takes Grace to Michael's room, telling her that all of her brother's belongings are kept in a box, and asks her to contact him if she finds anything important before he leaves the room. Left alone, Grace discovers Michael's journal, written entirely in their secret childhood code. As she flips through the pages, she uncovers a shocking revelation. She has absolutely no memory of her life before being adopted. Suddenly, a childhood memory floods back. A young Grace overhears that her adoptive father's boat was destroyed in a storm and his body was never recovered. Distraught by her adoptive mother's tears, she prays desperately for her father's return. Just then, a strange noise echoes from outside. Looking out of the window, she spots a mysterious figure. It vanishes in the blink of an eye, only to reappear right behind her. Back in the present, Grace notices a nun's reflection in the mirror through her open door. But when she looks back, the door is closed. She steps outside to investigate, but the hallway is empty. Meanwhile, Father Romero confronts the nuns after they tell the police that Father Carroll was killed by the devil. Fearing this will damage the church's reputation, Mother Superior questions why he gave Michael's journal to Grace. Romero asserts his authority, but Mother Superior warns that Grace can't be trusted. Pointing out that 2 priests are already dead, Romero counters that she is the untrustworthy one. Mother Superior insists he is severely underestimating Grace's power, just as the altar candles suddenly blow out. Back in her room, Grace reads a chilling entry in Michael's journal. Darkness enters their lives disguised as a miracle. Suddenly, a noise draws her attention to the window, where she sees Sister Meg sprinting into the woods. Fearing she needs help, Grace rushes after her, following her into a hidden cave. Stepping inside, she is horrified to see Meg slitting her wrists, only for Meg to suddenly appear behind her, snapping her out of the vivid hallucination. The real Meg explains the cave is her hideout when dark thoughts take over, anxiously asking Grace if she is a bad person. Grace reassures her that she isn't, before explaining that she needs to make an urgent phone call. Meg helps her back to the room and leaves so Grace can have some privacy. She calls John, who answers frantically because she hasn't been picking up. Grace drops a bombshell. Her brother was murdered, she's in Scotland, and she is falling apart from constant blackouts and hallucinations. Suddenly, Mother Superior appears from behind, pressing her about the visions. Grace hangs up on John and snaps at the older woman to stay away before stepping out of the room. However, Mother Superior cryptically warns that these visions are actually memories of her past and future. The next day, Detective Harris interrogates Mother Superior about illegally moving Michael's body. Unfazed, she proudly admits to washing the corpse to present it cleanly to God. Harris fires back, warning that the stunt is a felony that will land her in prison. Defiant, Mother Superior responds that a grand battle is raging between light and darkness, and a holy Christian act should never be punished. At the convent, Father Romero approaches Grace while she examines the paintings, asking if she has checked her brother's belongings. Grace confirms she has, explaining that the journal he found is written in a secret childhood code she and Michael used after their mother died, which she can translate. Back in her room, Grace reads further, triggering an intense flashback. When her father miraculously survives a storm and returns home, he changes into an abusive monster who locks them in cages. Young Grace wrapped a hidden key in paper, banged on her cage, faking a need for the bathroom, and secretly dropped the key to her mother while being taken upstairs. Her mother unlocked her cage and fled, but her father gave chase. As Grace tries to unlock Michael's cage, she hears her mother scream. Looking out the window, she witnesses her father brutally stabbing her mother to death outside. Terrified, she hides under her bed as her father searches the room for her. As he approaches the bed, an unseen force suddenly attacks him, knocking him unconscious. Back in the present, Grace confronts Romero about Michael's discovery that they were once adopted by this church, a fact she has no memory of. Romero denies knowing about it, but mentions Michael was searching for a lost relic when he returned to the convent. He explains that in 1993, an earthquake collapsed the old cliffside church, sending the relic into the ocean. He adds it was for the best, since the Crusaders' obsession with power gave the church a bad reputation. Father Romero tells Grace that there is a book in the church archives about the history of the relic, which Grace agrees to read. In another flashback, a priest and a nun arrive to adopt Grace and Michael after the tragedy. When the nun asks for Grace's birth certificate, she's told it doesn't exist and that the girl has simply taken her adoptive parents' last name. On their way to church, a priest abruptly kicks young Michael out of the car before speeding off with Grace. But their escape is short-lived when a truck suddenly slams into them, causing a horrific accident. Back in the present, a nun delivers another book to Grace from Father Romero before leaving her completely alone. Opening it, Grace is shocked to realize her and Michael's childhood code is actually an ancient language. Reading further, she learns about the Knights of the Morning Star discovering a powerful relic, followed by a sudden flashback of the Knights locking a masked girl in a cage, branding her a vessel of darkness. Finding the convent dead silent, Grace investigates an open door to a pitch-black room. Inside, she triggers a horrific vision of Father Carroll torturing Michael for the relic's location. When Michael stays silent, the priest orders the nuns to jump onto a wooden plank over Michael's body, crushing him. Mother Superior intervenes, ordering them to move him to the ruins instead to make peace with God, but Michael breaks free and stabs Father Carroll to death. Grace snaps back to reality and turns to flee, but a nun blocks her with a knife, cryptically calling herself the Lamp and Grace the Wolf. As the nun lunges, an unseen force freezes her midair and forces the blade back, making her repeatedly stab herself to death. The next day, Detective Harris interrogates a traumatized Grace. She reveals she finally knows why Michael was killed. The church is terrified of a missing, all-powerful relic. They used Michael to track it down, and now they are using her. But Detective Harris dismisses it as nothing more than a fantasy. Meanwhile, in a nearby cell, Mother Superior sits detained, quietly praying. Moments later, Detective Harris informs Grace that she is free to go. Father Romero called in to confirm a nun witnessed the incident, proving the nun took her own life. Shocked, as she remembers no witnesses, Grace insists Mother Superior is responsible for Michael's death, but Harris promises to question the older woman and tells Grace to leave. Grace visits her father in prison, but when she calls him Dad, he coldly snaps that he isn't her father, calling her the devil's own. When Grace demands to know why he starved them, locked them in cages, and killed her mother, he admits he should have killed her from the start. He claims he loved her as his own, but death and destruction followed her after her adoption, revealing he locked them in cages so she would not harm anyone. When Grace tells him that Michael is dead, he mockingly tells her to save him, like she saved him. He reveals he was supposed to die in that storm years ago, but when Grace prayed for his return, darkness answered instead of God. He recalls finding her on the beach at 10 years old, cold, wet, and shivering, realizing someone had thrown her into the sea. She should have died, yet she survived. Overcome with madness, he violently bangs his head against the glass, sending a terrified Grace fleeing. Meanwhile, back at the church, Father Romero prepares for a consecration ritual as the nuns lie prostrate on the floor. At the station, Detective Harris interrogates Mother Superior, who reveals that Michael found their lost relic but didn't understand its real dangerous power. She insists she must be purified, cleansed, and contained once more. When Harris asks, "Do you think Grace is the relic?" Mother Superior confirms it. Back at the church, Grace finds the nuns lying silently on the floor. She asks them where Father Romero is, but no one answers. Stepping outside, she spots Meg just as Sister Beth ambushes her from behind with a knife. Before the blade can strike, an invisible force brutally snaps Beth's wrist and hurls her aside. Terrified, Meg flees to her hideout cave with Grace close behind. Inside, Grace watches in horror as Meg slits her own wrists, matching a vision she had earlier. Grace desperately tries to stop the bleeding, but is stunned when she sees her shadow self in the mirror staring back at her, realizing she is the relic. Panicked, Grace runs back into the church and begs Father Romero to help her, crying out that she is cursed because she sees things before they happen and couldn't stop Meg's death. Romero approaches her, assuring her she isn't cursed, but blessed, and promises he can help. The nuns gather, lift Grace, and carry her into a hidden chamber for a consecration ritual. Romero asks if she wants to be cleansed by the Holy Spirit, as there is only one God. Seeking salvation, Grace agrees. The nuns open the chamber lid, and Grace slowly enters the heavy tomb. A flashback reveals that as a child, Grace was a masked girl captured by the knights, taken inside the old church, and sealed in a consecrated tomb. Back in the present, Grace hears Romero order the nuns to close the chamber lid, but Grace manages to stop it from shutting. Suddenly, a large, sharp metal cross detaches from above, falls down, and pierces Romero's back. As the nuns flee in terror, Grace climbs out and confronts the dying priest, asking, "So you buried me alive inside the tomb? What happened to forgiveness?" Weakly, Romero replies, "Christ died for the sins of man, not the sins of the fallen angels." Shocked, Grace asks, "So that's who I am?" Romero declares, "You're the darkness that hates the light. That's why you hate God, and you're lost with your brother and the God who you ask for forgiveness," before falling to his death. Grace runs outside into the ruins just as Detective Harris arrives at the church looking for her. Stepping backward toward the edge, Grace asks for forgiveness. Harris tries to stop her, telling her it's all just myths entering her mind. But Grace continues to step back until she plummets off the cliff. As she falls, a rapid montage of flashbacks reveals the ultimate twist. Grace's shadow self was responsible for everything. The blood on Michael's photo, the terrifying nun she saw in her apartment, the one who attacked her father, the car accident, the self-stabbing nun, Beth's broken wrist, and the falling cross. It was all her doing. Furthermore, she was present the night Michael fell from the ruins. The nuns felt her dark presence but couldn't see her. Only Michael saw her. Grace tried to stop her brother from killing himself, but Michael told her, "I have to do this, but God will catch me." Before falling, he told Grace that she was good, and then he stepped off the cliff. The film's ultimate revelation is that when young Grace's mind fractured while sinking deep into the water, her future adult self was cast backward through her own timeline to ensure her survival until she grew up. This future self acted as her guardian angel, ruthlessly eliminating anyone who dared to harm her. And now, with her memories fully unlocked, Grace's ancient time-traveling self and human self are finally unified. Harris witnesses her fall, but her body is never recovered from the sea. Later, Harris asks Mother Superior why Grace would do such things. She warns him that Grace isn't dead. She possesses an incredible power that she will use for evil until she is stopped. Sometime later, Grace meets her friend John at a restaurant and explains she is healing simply by forgetting, noting that her body remembers the trauma even if her mind doesn't. John views this as progress and mentions meeting an elderly patient who claims Grace miraculously cured her failing eyesight. A flashback confirms this. After the patient left her office, Grace's shadow self approached the woman's car, touched her eyes, and walked away while human Grace watched from the window. In the final scene, Mother Superior tracks Grace down in London and draws a gun to destroy the demon. Before she can shoot, an oncoming car veers off course and kills Mother Superior instantly. Hope you enjoy the recap. You can watch the next video for another great story. Thank you for watching.